Hi friends, today we are continuing the theme 6 of history. Today we are going to discuss about the new strands in fabric, that is Islamic traditions. Yesterday we talked about the arrival of Fakti tradition. Today we will discuss about the Islamic culture and the arrival of Islam and the Sufis. Okay, let's begin with that. Here, from the 7th century, with the advent of Islam, the northwestern regions became part of what is often termed as the Islamic world. We are talking about the arrival of Islam. Arab merchants frequented ports along the western coast in the first millennium CE. Central Asian people settled in the northwestern parts of the subcontinent during the same period. In 711, an Arab general named Mahmud Qasim conquered Sindh, which became part of the Caliph's domain. In the 13th century, the Turks and Afghans established the Delhi Sultanate, which was followed by the formation of sultanates in the Deccan and other parts of the subcontinent. It is the important point. In the 13th century, the Turks and Afghans established the Delhi Sultanate. It was followed by the formation of new sultanates in the Deccan and other parts of the subcontinent. Islam continued to be an acknowledged religion of all rulers in the several areas, even in the establishment of Mughal Empire in the 16th century, as well as in many of the regional states that emerged in the 18th century. Muslim rulers were to be guided by the ulama. These Muslim rulers were guided by ulama. Ulamas were the scholars of Sharia. Several rulers gave land endowments and granted tax exemption to Hindu, Jaina, Zoroastrian, Christian, and Jewish religious institutions, and also expressed respect and devotion towards non-Muslim religious leaders. They were, to an extent, they were secular. They never attacked or criticized the other believers. Other believers. These grants were made by several Mughal rulers, including Akbar and Aurangzeb. So we talked about the arrival of Islam. In the 13th century, the Delhi Sultanate was established, and it followed by the establishment of several new sultanates in the Deccan and other parts of continent. These Muslim rulers were tolerant. They have toleration. They tolerate the other beliefs in their domain and the popular practice. We are going to talk about the popular practice of Islam. Islam permeated far and wide through the subcontinent among the different social strata. In the Islam, they were supposed to follow the five pillars of the Islam. They were faith, there is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Offering prayers 5 times a day, or namaz, giving alms, zakat, fasting during the month of Ramzan, so, and performing the pilgrimage to Makkah, Hajj. These five pillars of Islam were supposed to followed by every Islam. The universal features were often overlaid with diversities derived from sectarian affiliations, Sunni and Shia. As we know, it even exists now, and the influence of local customary practices of converts. Arab Muslim traders who settled in Kerala adopted the local language Malayalam. Look, it's an example. They often adopted the language of the place where they settled. As an example, we can point out the Arab Muslim traders who settled in Kerala adopted the language Malayalam. The complex blend of a universal faith with the local tradition is best exemplified in the architecture of mosques. And we are going to names of communities. How these names derived and what are the significance of these names, etc. etc. The terms Hindu and Muslim did not gain currency for a very long time. We believe that some of us are believing Hindu and Muslims are a name we use from the ancient time, but it's not a fact. The terms Hindu and Muslim did not gain currency for a very long time. It's comparatively a new word. Historians point out that the term Musalman or Muslim was virtually never used. People were occasionally identified in terms of religion from which they came. The Turkish rulers were designated as Turushka. Tajika were people from Tajikistan, and Parashika were people from Persia. These are the examples of the thing. People were occasionally identified in terms of the religion. No, not religion, region from which they came. The Turkish rulers who came from Turk or Turkey were known as Turushka. Tajika were people from Tajikistan, and Parashika from people from Persia. Sometimes terms used for other peoples were applied to new migrants, like the Turks and Afghans were referred to as Shagas and Yevanas, as a term used for Greeks. A more general term for these migrant communities was Mlecha, indicating that they did not observe the norms of caste, society, and spoke languages that were not derived from Sanskrit. As we know, the Vedic culture was prevalent in India, and they called the new people arrived from other parts of the world, they call them Mlechas. It indicates that they did not observe the norms of caste and our society. Our society means the society of the Vedic Brahmins or the Vedic culture. Such terms are derogatory connotation, but it never denoted a distinct religious community of Muslims in opposition to Hindus. The term Hindu was used in a variety of ways, not necessarily restricted to a religious connotation. Now we are moving to Sufism, the growth of Sufism in India. It's an important topic of this chapter. The growth of Sufism. Who were Sufis? In the early centuries of Islam, a group of religious minded people called Sufis turned to asceticism and mysticism in protest against the growing materialism of the caliphate as a religious and political institution. After the creation of Islam, some people left Islam. They began to known as Sufis. They opposed the materialism in the caliphate. They were more religious minded. They were critical to the dogmatic definition and scholastic method of interpreting the Quran and Sunnah. Sunnah is the tradition of the Prophet and adopted by theologians. Instead, they laid emphasis on seeking salvation through intense devotion and love for God by following His commands and by following the example of Prophet Muhammad, whom they regarded as a perfect human being. The Sufis thus sought an interpretation of the Quran on the basis of their personal experience. According to Sufis, the Prophet was a perfect example of a human being. They laid emphasis on seeking salvation through intense devotion and love for God by following His commands. Thus, these people were known as Sufis. Now, Kankas and Silsilas. By the 11th century, Sufism evolved into a well-developed movement with a body of literature on Quranic studies and Sufi practices. By the 11th century, Sufism evolved into a well-developed movement. They had a well-versed literature on Quranic studies and they had several practices also. Institutionally, the Sufis began to organize communities around the hospice or Kanka, controlled by a teaching master known as Sheikh. They began to organize communities around a Kanka. Kanka is a hospice. This Kanka is controlled by a teaching master known as Sheikh, Pir or Murshid. He enrolled disciples and appointed a successor Khalifa. He established rules for spiritual conduct and interaction between inmates as well as between layperson and the master. There were rules. The word silsila literally means a chain, signifying a continuous link between master and disciple, stretching as an unbroken spiritual genealogy to the Prophet Muhammad. The term silsila. There will be a question, what is silsila, or explain the silsila. The word silsila means a chain. It signifies a continuous link between master and disciple, stretching as an unbroken spiritual genealogy to the Prophet Muhammad. It starts from the Prophet Muhammad and connects all Sufis. Sufi silsilas began to crystallize in different parts of the Islamic world around the 12th century. When the Sheikh died, his tomb or shrine, it is known as Dargah, a Persian term meaning court, became the center of devotion for his followers. This encouraged the practice of pilgrimage or ziyarat to his grave. This was because people believed that in the death saints were united with God and were thus closer to him than when living. Thus evolved the cult of the Sheikh, revered as Wali. All of us know there are many dargahs in India. There are all over the world. The dargahs is the tomb shrine of a Sheikh. It became more important because people believed that after death these sheikhs will be united with God. And so it will be more powerful, or it have more magic. What will you say? People will get more worship if they go and pray in these dargahs. So the pilgrimage to dargahs were known as ziyarat. Who were radical or Bisharia Sufis? Some mystics took to radical interpretation of Sufi ideals. Many scorned the Kanka and took to mendicancy and observed celibacy. They ignored rituals and observed extreme forms of asceticism. They were known by different names: Kalandars, Madiris, Malangs, Haidaris, etc. Because of their deliberate defense of the Sharia, they were often referred as Bisharia, in contrast to the Basharia Sufis who complied with it. The people who contrasted were Bisharia and the other were Basharia. The Chishtis in the subcontinent. Of the groups of Sufis who migrated in India in the late 12th century, the Chishtis were the most influential. Sorry, I have to make this as a headline. The Chishtis in subcontinent. It's a main part of the topic. Of the group of Sufis, there were many groups of Sufis in India, but the main or the important ones were Chishtis. Chishti Kanka. The Kanka was the center of social life. A well-known example is the Sheikh Nizamuddin's hospice of 14th century. The Sheikh Nizamuddin's hospice on the banks of river Yamuna in the Ghiaspur, on the outskirts of what was then the city of Delhi. The inmates included family members of the Sheikh, his attendants and disciples. The inmates of Kanka were the included family members of the Sheikh, his attendants and the disciples. The Sheikh lived in a small room on the roof of the hall, where he met visitors in the morning and evening. On one occasion, fearing a Mongol invasion, people from the neighboring areas flocked into the Kanka to seek refuge. There was an open kitchen. It is known as Langar, run on Futuh. Futuh is unsacred for charity. Visitors from according to we are talking about the visitors. They were allowed from morning till late night. People from all walks of life visited there. Hindu yogis and Kalandars came seeking discipleship, amulets for healing, and the intercession of the Sheikh in various matters. In these Kangas, visitors were allowed. They came at any time of the day. They included people from all walks of the life. They were Hindu yogis and Kalandars. They came for many things. Their needs were different. Like some of them came for seeking discipleship, they came for amulets for healing, and some of them wanted intercession of the Sheikh in various matters. Other visitors include poets such as Amir Hassan Sitsi, Amir Khusru, and the court historian Siyasuddin Barani, all of whom wrote about the Sheikh. Pilgrimage called Ziyarat to tombs of Sufi saints is prevalent all over the Muslim world. It's the continuation of the thing we said before about the Dargah. Pilgrimage called Ziyarat to tombs of Sufi saints is prevalent all over the Muslim world. This practice is an occasion for seeking the Sufi spiritual grace. The spiritual grace of Sufi is known as Barakat. People expressed their devotion at the Dargahs of the five great Chishti saints for more than 7 centuries. The most revered shrine of there is of that Khwaja Muinuddin of 14th century, popularly known as Garib Nawaz. The Khwaja Muinuddin, he was a Chishti. The Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti known as Garib Nawaz. His dargah is the most revered one. It was evidently popular because of the austerity and piety of its sheikh, the greatness of his spiritual successors, and the patronage of royal visitors. By the 16th century, the shrine had become very popular. In fact, it was the spirited singing of pilgrims bound for Ajmer that inspired Akbar to visit the tomb. He went there 14 times. See, by the 16th century, the shrine had become very popular. The tomb or the dargah of Muinuddin Chishti. In fact, it was the spirited singing of pilgrims bound for Ajmer that inspired even Akbar, the emperor, to visit tomb. He went there 14 times. Also, part of Ziyarat is the use of music and the dance, including mystical chants performed by specially trained musicians or qawwals to evoke divine ecstasy. The Sufis remember God either by reciting the zikr or evoking his presence through sama, literally audition, or performance of mystical music. Sama was integral to the Chishtis and exemplified the interaction with the indigenous devotional traditions. Here we say about sama and zikr. Here we are talking about languages and communication. The Chishtis adopted the local languages. In Delhi, they associated with the Chishti Silsila converted into Hindawi, a language of the Persian. The other Sufis such as Baba Farid composed verses in the local language which were incorporated in the Guru Granth Sahib. The Hindavi is the language of people. Some composed long poems or masnavis to express ideas of divine love using human love as an allegory. For example, the Premakhyan love story, Padmavat composed by Malik Muhammad Jasi, revolved around the romance of Padmini and Ratnasen, the king of Chittur. Their trials were symbolic of the soul's journey to the divine. Such poetic compositions were often recited in hospices, usually during Sama. A different genre of Sufi poetry was composed in and around the town of Bijapur, Karnataka. There were short poems in Dakhani. Dakhani is a variant of Urdu, attributed to Chishti Sufis who lived in this region during the 17th and 18th centuries. These poems were probably sung by women while performing household chores like grinding grain and spinning. Other compositions were in the form of lurinama or lullabies and shadinama or wedding songs. It is through his medium that Islam gradually gained a place in the villages of Deccan. Okay, today we talked about many things. The basic principles of Islam, the introduction of Islam, the coming of Islam to the India, and about the Sufis. About the Sufis, we talk about radical or Bisharia Sufis, and about the Kankas and Silsilas, the inmates there, the things happened in there, and we talked about who were Sufis and how Sufis formed. Okay, that's all for today. Tomorrow we will finish this chapter.